Welcome to the viewers of the series Exploring Careers in Creative Design. My name is Claire Wolcott. I go to Middlebury College, and I would like to introduce this episode's guest speaker. I'm joined today by Katie Rominger of class of 2014, who is an international global studies major and a studio art minor. She is currently design director at Jones Knowles Ritchie, an independent creative agency. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Katie.
Hi, Clara. Great to be here and be chatting about the design world.
So excited. Katie, this series explores a number of different professional roles involved in creative design. So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about your organization and what you do in your role there as a design director.
Absolutely, yeah. So I work at a creative design studio called Jones Knowles Ritchie. It was started about 30 years ago in London. Historically, they've had a consumer packaged goods focus. So that's like anything that you would find on a shelf in a store. So working for companies like Heinz and Planters, but also for recently a lot of fast food companies like Burger King and Dunkin' Donuts. M&M's was a recent one as well. And I joined as a design director about 5 months ago, after spending 6 years at Pentagram, where I started kind of my design career as a designer and then associate partner. But when I was at Pentagram, I primarily focused on branding for cultural institutions. So very different jump for me from working with museums and nonprofits to working with big food brands.
Wow, that's so interesting. Actually, I want to touch on that briefly of like what exactly you already mentioned branding. Is that all a creative agency is? Like what all makes up a creative agency?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I work directly with clients, strategists, account managers, and designers to basically bring brands to life through visuals and language. So sometimes that means a new name, sometimes it means a new logo, other times it's just changing the colors and the typefaces or adding a tagline. So it can take many shapes and forms, and depending on how ambitious the brand wants to be and how much they want to change, sometimes we only change one of those elements, sometimes we change all. And often that process starts with what we call an audit. So we work with our strategists closely on that to look at what competitors are doing, what the existing sample set looks like. We do interviews. Then we take a look at all of that information and start developing visual concepts and mood boards to sort of launch into the visual design side of things, but not after we've done all of our research.
Okay. So you already touched again on this pretty briefly, but what are some of the key differences between Jones Knowles Ritchie and other kind of creative design agencies?
Yeah, so Jones Knowles Ritchie is they do branding primarily. I think a lot of people hear the word agency and think it has to mean advertising, and we do not do advertising. Every once in a while, we'll do some type of activation like a strategy, but for the most part, we're just talking about brands and the way they describe themselves with language and visually. We're not creating like TV spots or doing media buys, things that advertising agencies do. I'm actually not as familiar as I should be because I've never been interested in working in that field, because for me, I like working with brands from the ground up and working with them to kind of create something new rather than working with an existing brand and coming up with kind of copy and activations and TV spots like that.
Okay, that's really interesting. And so, like, I guess one question I have is how much, as a design director, are you really in the design process, and yeah, what is that like?
So as a design director, I was previously a designer. So that was really my only experience was, and as a designer, you're kind of like the worker bee. So you're making things every day, which I love. That's one of my favorite parts of my job, is that I'm actually making something. I'm not just in meetings all day. I will say, as a design director, I'm definitely more in meetings all day. And I think that is just a result of, climbing the ladder and flexing different muscles. I still get to create things. And of course, I'm part of the group creating things and directing them. But on a day-to-day basis, I'm supervising a group of designers and senior designers to develop creative concepts that we've come up with together. And I'm sort of making sure that the team can hit our deadlines and work closely with the account managers to keep our clients happy. So that's sort of my day-to-day, is checking in consistently with my teams working on different clients.
What do you feel like, you said you've been in this role for 5 months, but have, these 6 years of really incredible design experience. And how do you feel like this role has kind of changed over time for you, I guess, in the industry, or like in the nature of the work, or the skills you use, or the tools?
Definitely. Yeah, that's a good question. And I think that kind of ties in a little bit to, the changes are also the challenges sometimes. I think that there's this phenomenon called blanding. I don't know if you've heard the term before, but it's this sort of increased desire of companies and brands to blend in and do what everyone else is doing. So it's really like, as you would expect, the tech giants are the companies that have propelled this. And so it's the reason why everyone wants a custom sans serif typeface. Uber made their own typeface just for the sake of having it. Google also has one. And it just sort of proliferated from there. And so it has, now we have clients coming to us wanting these custom typefaces, but not having a real reason beyond the fact that they're seeing these larger companies commission their own. And there's a quote that we often use at JKR. I think I'd heard this quote before I joined, but they definitely use it a lot. It's an Oscar Wilde quote: "Be yourself, everyone else is taken." And that is sort of the ethos we have of, don't try to be a Google or an Uber. Like, find out what makes you you and amplify that. So that's what I try to do every day in branding, is finding the kind of core essence of whatever my client is trying to be. And sometimes that means that, you go into their visual archives. Like for Burger King, they dove into their archives from the 70s and really tried to leverage that feeling of like, the kind of old style typefaces. And that's why that brand became such a success, was because it wasn't trying to become like a McDonald's or I don't know. And my knowledge of fast food companies really ends quite quickly, but they weren't trying to be another burger place. They were trying to leverage their existing identity and really just become more of themselves.
Okay. So in additional like visual archives, or you mentioned that you love working with startups and people who are kind of building their brand from the bottom up. Like, how do you engage in finding that essence if there's not that like visual catalog? What is that process like?
That, I think in that case, and that does happen. We work with brands that don't exist yet. And then I think the audit and the interviews become even more important, because you really need to talk to everyone at the organization and figure out what each person's individual need and desire and their vision of the company is, and then try to distill that as best you can, which is hard. And then because you're basically creating, I found that branding is very personal to clients. It's very sensitive. It's the reason that we always try to bring in the CEO from the very beginning of the process, because otherwise, if they're only being brought in at the very end to do final sign off, they don't feel involved. They don't feel like they got to say their part. So that is a big strategic move we always try to make, is get leadership involved from the very beginning so they feel some ownership over it, because at the end of the day, it's a personal thing. Like, your logo is going to be on your business card that you hand to people. I mean, if people still hand out business cards, I don't really think they do, but We still
No,
make them.
yeah, no, I mean, I've found that even in my as I've been going through Middlebury, seeing people who can, or trying to figure out like what the taste that I want to leave in people's mouths is, or
Yeah,
like that, like what, how does my
right. It's your
identity reflect
impression
itself
on the world.
visually? Yeah, yeah, and it's sometimes a painful process. So it's really cool that um, JKR is there to like help ease and make it an enjoyable process. Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely feels sometimes like a little bit of therapy involved, and like we have
Okay.
to, like a leader will say, well, I really don't love the color green, and we have to say, well, tell us about that. Why don't you like the color green?
Yeah.
Dive into that. And so that happens every once in a while where we have to really push our clients to question their own
Mm,
personal opinions of things, especially, we never like to say, look, we're the experts. That is never, sometimes it works, but I've found, especially through my former boss at Pentagram, he loved kind of starting meetings by saying like, look, I'm just a homely graphic designer. Like, what do I know? And it really disarms the client to start meetings that way, to
yeah.
just be upfront. And I think design is something that intimidates people who don't know much about it. And so trying to level the playing field is always a
Mhm.
good strategy. But of course, taking the place of authority when you need to.
And I just have one last question in this kind of area is what do you like thinking forward into the
Mhm.
field of design? What do you see as some of those like the new challenges and new opportunities that are arising?
Yeah, I think designers have an opportunity to work more with nonprofits and foundations. A lot
Mhm.
of the work we do at JKR is commercial, but we also work with school. Like right now, I'm doing work for a charter school in the Bronx and doing signage for them. And that project is totally pro bono and has, great minds of strategists and designers behind it. And it's really important work that needs to be done. We're also working with other nonprofits, and I think that lending our skills where we can to that sphere is always a good part of to have that balance in our jobs, not always thinking about the commercial side of things, but how can
Mhm.
brand help these organizations fundraise, because it is a core part of looking the part, especially to donors, is if you have an established presence through a logo and your typefaces and your colors, that really it does speak powerfully to potential donors. So that's something that I see firms doing more of intentionally, including JKR, and I
Mhm.
think it's only going to keep getting more involvement, hopefully.
Yeah. Okay. And can I ask maybe one of the challenges moving for the design field moving forward?
How to stay unique in a world where everyone can make their own custom typeface and every
Mm.
logo kind of looks the same, and it's about finding your niche, and it's hard, but that's why the design firms of the world exist.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Katie, thank you so much for sharing these insights. And I'm also just really curious about your experience of moving from the campus to your career and that journey. And at Mid, you majored in international global studies and were a studio art minor. So I would love to hear a little bit more of the of your story.
Definitely. So I made an active decision not to go to art school, despite having done a summer program at RISD and thinking about, like how I really loved printmaking at the time. I just knew, maybe because I had older siblings, that I wanted to do the liberal arts experience. And I was lucky enough to have parents who supported that. Um, that said, I did not know what graphic design was until I was a senior at Mid. So it wasn't like I knew from the beginning, which is why I was international studies, which I loved. I got to take a ton of history classes and language classes. I got to study abroad. So I have no regrets about a major that had nothing to do with my ultimate career, which I'm sure lots of Middlebury students have that experience as well. But I I kind of discovered graphic design actually through the Middlebury magazine. I
Oh,
noticed
cool.
I noticed that one month the issue looked pretty different, and I was like, "Huh, like this is actually, it looks like really well done." And I looked up the creative director at the time, Pam Fogg, and asked if she could meet me at the grill for lunch. And we chatted about her career and in graphic design, and she said you should
Okay.
meet with this Middlebury alum, Noelle, who was living in Minnesota at the time. So yeah, I called Noelle, similar to how we're chatting right now, and she kind of, again, like we just had an informational chat. Um, but she told me, she was like, if you're really serious about this, you should try taking some classes at, an art school. And
Mhm.
so that's exactly what I did. I post Middlebury I was able to live at home in New York and take some classes at the School of Visual Arts.
Oh, cool.
Um, and that turned into me deciding to enroll full time in a second bachelor's degree.
Wow. Okay.
Which I was able to negotiate down to 2 years with all my credits from Middlebury and everything. Um, but yeah, it's a path that I think was very roundabout. And I don't think it's the only path you can take to this career. It's definitely not. I think wherever you decide to learn, there are technical aspects to my job that you need to learn, but you can do that, online. You can do that
Mhm.
with an instructor or without an instructor. You can do it in person if you want. I think the most important thing that I discovered was the network that I got through my art school,
Mhm.
and the fact that all the instructors were full-time, employees at design firms in the city. That became the most important part and connection that I made at that school. Was that's how I got my internship at Pentagram, was
Mhm.
through a referral from one of my instructors there. So that kind of became the core of that experience, beyond, of course, learning all the programs.
Okay. I see. So yeah, definitely like having that bachelor's degree, it sounds like, or that with going to visual arts school sounds like that was just absolutely pivotal.
Yeah,
In
I
your
think
life. Yeah.
people I've people ask me about this all the time. I've had a bunch of conversations with Middlebury students where they say, I don't, there aren't classes here that teach you those specific programs. How do I gain those skills? And there are a million different places you can do it. I think it's finding the best path, whether it means cost or commitment to time. Everyone's going to have a different route. Um,
Yeah.
I will say there are other ways into design beyond becoming a designer. A role that I did not know about until I started at Pentagram was project managers. And they basically get to be involved in every part of the design process other than the design. So they get to interact with the clients, they help run the projects, help us hit deadlines, help do interviews. So they do all the parts of the process
Mm.
except the actual designing. And you don't need any program training in that. Like you could go
Yeah.
straight from Middlebury to a project manager position
Mm.
easily. It's really just about organization, and communication skills, which I think every student at Middlebury has.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting. I didn't know about um that it was like that kind of accessible, or that all the different pieces that project management in a design firm entailed. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was another world in which I had known about that position, and I would have
Oh.
gone straight to that first and been like, okay, do I like design from this world? Okay, I like it enough. Maybe I'll try becoming a graphic
Mm.
designer. And there are people that do that.
Mhm.
So I think it's a really good option for Middlebury students who are not sure if they're convinced of the design world yet, but want to see what it's like.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Um, Wow. Okay. So thanks so much for sharing your experiences. And, you've already offered like so much advice, but just to follow up really specifically of like what are some kind of tangible points of advice that you would love to offer us liberal arts students as we kind of are entering the career field?
I mean, it's so tough. I was definitely in the shoes of, I don't know what I want to do. Oh my gosh, how is it already senior year? And I didn't figure this out yet. And it's scary, but I would say just try things, talk to as many people as you can, gather information. I also went through a period of my life at Middlebury when I thought I wanted to be a lawyer and did an internship with a judge. And then I talked to a bunch of my parents' friends who were lawyers and decided that was not the path for me. And I got talked out of that relatively quickly.
Mm.
Um, and I think it's all about information gathering when you're at this point in your life. And it's okay to try things and to not like them. I think your graduating class is in a very fortunate position where it's a very good hiring market right now, and you're in a good position to negotiate for yourselves. So I think that is to your benefit. And I would say, figure out what roles you're interested in and how you can, or if they're not perfect, how you can leverage them for your next jumping off point. So that's sort of, just keep an open mind in these first couple years post college.
Yeah, it's good advice. I hear it. Do you feel like there's a specific skill set where, at Middlebury, it's like those are things you can start gathering now? I mean, you talked about specific programs. Like, could you speak maybe a little more on that?
Yeah, so I know that at at Middlebury, the studio art program has come a little bit of it's improved a little bit since I've been there in terms of teaching, Photoshop and Illustrator and InDesign. Those are kind of the core programs that my team works in. So if there's, any interest you have in that and want to play around in it and learn it or take some courses, those are kind of the hard skills I would say are essential to the job if you want to be a designer. I would say skills that you're probably already learning or honing are just speaking confidently about yourself and your work. That goes a long way, especially, in my position now as a design director. A lot of what I do is speaking about work and presenting work. So it's keeping clients, happy and interested. And so I think, communication skills are equally as important as the hard skills of learning the programs.
Yeah. Um, Very, very cool. I've just so enjoyed talking with you. It's been really great. Some other kind of questions about the career field are just like what, if people maybe don't have access to the kinds of design classes that you did or weren't able to find them or maybe are not so much interested in that, what kind of other experiences do you feel like might lend themselves to kind of this entry level point in the design career field?
Well, yeah, and that's where I would say a job like project management
Okay.
is probably the better option if you're not totally wanting to commit to the cost or time of learning the technical programs. You can learn a lot on the job. So even as a project manager, you'll be sitting side by side with the designers and you'll inevitably probably be using some of the programs and just having to teach yourself. So that is a cheaper way, certainly, of learning the programs. You're not going to be as, you're not going to be on the same level as the designers themselves, but it is definitely kind of a workaround. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, no, thanks for talking a little bit more about that. Um, when you're interviewing somebody, I guess, what are some of you've mentioned, communication skills. Are there other things, others that you kind of really value or see as maybe warning signs? Um, either, either or.
Yeah, I think the major things I look at, of course, their portfolio. That's number one kind of, but it's really a screening, right? It's just to see if their work is at a certain level. Ultimately, what will make me want to hire them is once I speak to them and, they present themselves as organized and confident and capable. I think it's one of a red flag for me, for example, is if someone says, oh, let me just pull up this tab. Sorry, I had my website up a second ago. Like, let me just find it. if you're there for an interview, you should have been sitting in your seat for 10 minutes ahead of time, like I was before this interview. You should have everything pulled up that you need. You should do whatever breathing exercises you need to do to stay calm. Like, you should be extra prepared for that. And it makes a difference. I think the candidates who don't seem as prepared don't seem like they're as interested and aren't appreciative of the time that I'm giving them. So I think it's about showing your appreciation by being prepared, speaking confidently about your work, and then, of course, having the work to back it up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Katie, that kind of comes to the conclusion of our time. Thank you so much again for your engagement with us and helping students to prepare for their first career destinations. Really appreciate it.
Of course, I'm happy to chat about it anytime. And I feel so fortunate that I ended up in this field and that I love it. And I'm happy to get anyone else in on design from the Middlebury world.
I love that. Many thanks. So this concludes this episode within the series Exploring Careers in Creative Design. In closing, I really want to encourage viewers to turn in to get career perspectives and advice from a number of different professionals in a broad variety of organizations in our other episodes in the series. I also want to encourage you to tune in to the other MIDDVantage series, which can be accessed through the Events and Programs tab on the CCI website. Thank you again for watching.